Good morning. We're in the middle of a sermon series, in which we're talking about the pursuit of happiness, and we're following Solomon. Solomon ruled Israel when it was prosperous and powerful. He had everything he needed to engage in the pursuit of happiness with abandon. His wisdom was a drawback. His wisdom prevented him from deceiving himself with respect to how successful he was in his pursuit. He couldn't claim to be happy when he wasn't. And if he fell short, he had to be honest about him. That's the reason why his wisdom might have prevented him. So he's very honest. And his journal is the book of Ecclesiastes, found in the Old Testament of the Bible. The tone of the writing suggests that late in life he looked back on his pursuit of happiness with a tinge of regret. He spoke a lot about wisdom, and he relates wisdom to happiness. Look what it says in your worship folder. There's some passages we'll look at from Ecclesiastes and in James. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Before dealing with wisdom, Solomon will identifies four obstacles, four behaviors that are associated with a lack of wisdom, four behaviors that evidence the need for wisdom. He writes, extortion turns a wise man into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the heart. The end of a matter is better than its beginning. Patience better than pride. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. Do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. First of the obstacles to wisdom is oppression. Oppression. It says extortion. What it means, extortion or oppression, it's targeting those who are without adequate means to defend their rights, and as a result are easily exploited. Those who do not have material resources or social resources, they can't prevent people from taking advantage of them. Extortion turns an eye toward them when those more powerful than them exploit them, deprive them of justice, defraud them of money. The denial of social justice is what is associated with oppression. It says it drains wisdom and replaces it with foolishness. It says even more, a bribe corrupts the heart. And what Solomon writes, when somebody accepts a bribe, especially when the bribe is defrauding someone of social justice, they have a legitimate claim to services and needs. And when somebody puts themselves in a place where those needs are diverted away from those to whom it belongs and to whom it really they deserve to be able to receive it, the person who accepts the bribe actually destroys part of their heart. Oppression is an evidence of a lack of wisdom. It's an evidence of foolishness. Pride is, well, it says patience is better than pride. Patience in the Bible, pride, in the Bible means high-mindedness. Humility is low. So each of them, humility and pride are directional. Pride is high. The word for pride is up. And that's where a person who is prideful, it feels entitled. They feel that their needs and their wants outrank the needs and wants of others, that it's better than others. Humility is the opposite. It's low. A person who would defer to the needs and wants of somebody else. Pride impatiently demands what is wanted. Conversely, patience is the ability to live with tension and to exercise restraint. When we're unable to exercise restraint, when we want something, we make efforts to get it. Our ability to inhibit an aggressive response when we're not wise, our ability to inhibit that response is low. We have to get what we want, and that's associated with pride and not with wisdom. Pride can interfere with wisdom because it can develop within the heart of the person. They don't even see it. A genie mindset. A genie mindset. You know what genies say, right? Your wish is my command. And the person who is prideful thinks my wishes should be your commands. And if I want something and you're not deferring to what I want, something's wrong. That's what pride, it assumes that my agenda is more important than your agenda and you should capitulate with what I want. The path to wisdom will move us towards social justice and away from prideful arrogance. Interestingly, it says in Ezekiel 16 about the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. Ezekiel prophesies about what their sin was. And what do you imagine that it would say? Certainly, immorality, homosexuality. They're very, very lascivious. Well, it says, now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. What was the root of their problem? Certainly, part of their problem was their immorality. It seems to suggest here that immorality wasn't the root of their problem. It was the fruit of the problem. The root of the problem was social injustice. They didn't care about the poor and the needy. They defrauded the needy of justice. Their immorality was the sign of a heart that had been ravaged by the disease of greed. That's what Solomon said. A bribe accepted destroys the heart. The immorality exemplified in Sodom and Gomorrah seems to be a sign of a heart that had been destroyed by greed, that lost its ability to understand what was noble and what was ignoble. Happiness on the far side of extortion, happiness at the expense of the needs of someone to whom services are merited, is really not worth the price. It destroys the heart. Oppression and pride, anger. Solomon says, a person who is, do not be quickly provoked in your spirit. Anger resides in the lap of fools. To be quickly provoked means to tremble with anger. Not necessarily something that's seen, but to have an agenda, to feel like I should get this, and to tremble with anger. That's the image that Solomon paints. It's a reaction from being prevented from getting what we want or doing what we want to do. Solomon indicates that wisdom doesn't have a short fuse. It has a long fuse. It's not quickly provoked. It doesn't snap judgments when it doesn't get what it wants. The last, it says oppression and pride, anger. And interestingly enough, it says in verse 10, do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. It seems to indicate nostalgia. Nostalgia. A longing for the good old days. The good old days. Something certainly that's worth things about the old days that were good in any age. However, to thirst and think longingly about the past often is a reaction to the present. And interestingly enough, anything can be the good old days. This is interesting. Here's what the Israelites said, walking through the wilderness. You know where they had come from slavery in Egypt. That was not a picnic. So listen to this. The Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. Now there's no problem there, but listen to where they go. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we've lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. Even they might have forgotten the beatings. Okay, so we forgot the beatings, and we forgot the fact that we didn't get to eat. But boy, do you remember the onions? Do you remember the leeks? I don't. Eating leeks. That's not. There's some words that shouldn't be foods. There's words that there should. Head cheese. Those are two words that don't belong together. They, just keep those apart. Okay. Obstacles to wisdom: oppression, impatience, pride, nostalgia. The opportunities for wisdom. Solomon goes on in the passage in Ecclesiastes, talks about wisdom. It says, wisdom like an inheritance is a good thing and benefits those who see the sun. Wisdom is a shelter, as money is a shelter. But the advantage of knowledge is this, that wisdom preserves the life of its possessor. Consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? When times are good, be happy. But when times are bad, consider. God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, a man cannot discover anything about his future. It says that wisdom benefits those who see the sun. It is a shelter. Literally, shelter means shadow, shade. I want you to think about being in a very hot climate in the desert and no relief from the exposure to the sun. Then there's a tree or an outcropping, and then you're able to go into the outcropping and find shade and shelter. And that's what wisdom is, and that's what money is as well, a place that provides protection from overexposure. Wisdom provides that. For those who see the sun, those of us who live in this world, wisdom, knowledge, the ability to understand is shade. It provides a sense of respite, a sense of relief from the difficulties associated with life under the sun. Money does the same thing. That's interesting. Money is shade as well. It's a place that you can go to for protection, to be insulated from the elements. If you have enough money, there's the sense of, I'm good. I'm good. I can kind of duck underneath my checkbook, and in this place with my checkbook over my head, I am protected from the things that might happen to some other people. Interestingly, it says the difference between money and wisdom is that wisdom provides a shade that gives life. Money provides a shade that takes it. So, in effect, money is the effect of money is worse than the effect of the sun. Solomon goes on, consider what God has done. Who can straighten what he has made crooked? When times are good, be happy. But when times are bad, consider. God made the one as well as the other. It says God makes bad times and good times. It's interesting. Judaism began as a religion that was monistic. It was one God and theistic, the one God who created everything. Over the period of the Old Testament, Judaism became increasingly dualistic and deistic. What I mean by dualism is that there's not just one person that rules the universe, there's kind of two. There's God, and then there's those who oppose God. That God, when in the beginning of Judaism, was theistic. God is the one who controlled everything. You remember the book of Job? What happens in the book of Job? God is presiding over the court of heaven. He is determining what happens and what doesn't happen. Satan comes to him and has to ask permission to do something to Job. The permission is granted. Clearly, there is no dualism there, is there? God is in control. He is issuing orders and directives relative to what happens. It's monistic. And then what ended up happening is it became increasingly dualistic, especially after the captivities in the 8th and the 6th centuries. And God ends up being seen as somebody who kind of gets the world spinning, but he kind of stands back. Again, the genesis of evil is a difficult question. Solomon would indicate, though, from his perspective, God makes not good and evil, but good times and bad times. God makes one as well as the other. And I guess what that means, you can't put yourself in a place where you're protected from that, because everything comes from God, and you can't protect yourself from what he does. Sometimes we might feel like I'm in a shaded place. Nothing can happen to me. I'm only going to experience good things. Things change quickly, don't they? Don't they? Life turns on a dime. And that's what Solomon says. Life is unpredictable. And this is tough. Good times and bad times, especially when you're looking at life through a narrow angle lens. A narrow angle lens can only see life under the sun. The 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, maybe 100 years of this life for a few. Narrow angle wisdom, Psalm 73, can be difficult. The psalmist looks around at bad things happening to good people, good things happening to bad people, and it vexes him, it grates him. Ever grate you? People that really don't care about doing what's right, and they get things, and they defraud the poor, and they get away with it. And a guy looks around in the psalmist, Psalm 73, and it just is driving him crazy. He can't understand it. And he is trying to do good things. And he feels like he's punished all day long. And he tries to add this up, and it makes no sense to him. The more he tries to understand it, the more angry he becomes. And let me read what it says in Psalm 73, verse 21. When my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and ignorant. I was a brute beast before you. You understand what brute beast means? This guy, and yet then he goes on, though. And this is what he says. Yet, I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel. And afterward you will take me into glory. It's one of those places, there's a little glimpse of life on the other side of death. These glimpses in the Old Testament are very rare. They're not bright enough to give people an idea of eternity. Eternity, you can't find it in the Old Testament. There's little glimpses of it, but not enough to provide an eternal hope. It felt like you hit the grave, and basically that was it. But this guy says, whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is my strength, the strength of my heart, and my portion forever. In the Old Testament, forever, when it says it, the word forever, olam, means a long time. It refers to the period of life. It's not looking at eternity. Eternity is what rose out of the grave with Jesus. Jesus brings life and immortality to light. We cannot look at life like Solomon did, because he didn't have the perspective of the cross and the empty tomb. Eternity is real. Immorality is real too. Immortality is real. How do we know? There was a body in that grave and it's gone. They knew where it was. There was a stone rolled over against the face of that tomb. There was a body placed in there. It was wrapped in cloths. And they went in there, and the cloths were lying there as if somebody had passed through them bodily. There wasn't a body there. The cloths were empty. It would have been wrapped from bottom of the neck and from the face. They were there and collapsed. Where did the body go? It went into immortality. And what Jesus said, if you believe in me, the same thing will happen to you. We can't look at life the same way. We now look at life with a view to eternity. And this makes us, it encourages us when we're looking at life to not put a narrow angle lens on, not 2,100 years, to put a different lens on, an eternal lens. And that changes the way we live. Here's what Jesus said. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Whatever it means to take up the cross, it's not saying you're going to get what you want. Would you agree? To take up a cross is to move towards demise and death. We are heading towards death. Death is not going to be a pleasant experience for anyone, for any of us, except for seconds after we're going to wake up in another place, and we're going to be in that place through faith in Christ eternally. And there would not be enough money in the world to lure you back to this life. And the experience, the understanding of the comparative joys of this life and that life. That's what Jesus said. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for me will find it. Then he asks a question. It's one of those bottom line banker questions, only from a spiritual perspective. Let's consider investments. And here's what Jesus said. What good will it be for a man if he gains the whole world, yet forfeits his soul? Let's talk about investments. How smart is it to invest your life with respect to a narrow angle view when you're going to be alive thousands of years from now? Does it make sense to throw all your eggs into the basket of what's experienced in this life and not even pay attention to the future? It doesn't make sense. That's what Jesus is saying. How does that make sense? You know what? Oppression, impatience, anger, and nostalgia. Oppression, impatience, anger, nostalgia come when you're looking at life through which lens? The wide-angle lens? You're going to be nostalgic, really angry, impatient, and extort people with a wide-angle lens on, understanding that you're going to be alive a zillion years from now? Are you going to do that? Absolutely not. You know what that comes with? Narrow-angle lens. And a wide-angle lens is wise. How do we gain wisdom? How do we gain? We talked about it. How do we gain it? The Bible gives us some directives. Look what it says in James. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not think he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. Let's define some words. Consider it all joy. What it means to consider is to direct or lead your thoughts. Wisdom doesn't come naturally. Thoughts will not flow in the direction of wisdom. Thoughts will flow in the direction of narrow-angle lens living, nostalgia, pride, impatience, anger. That's where our unconditioned thoughts will go. If our thoughts are going to go in a different direction, it's because we lead them in that direction, which means not just that we listen to ourselves, but that we speak to ourselves. That we speak to ourselves. We see ourselves reacting. We take ourselves and we tell ourselves things. That's what the Bible encourages. It tells us things that impact our attitude. Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials. Again, when you reach into your mind in the midst of a trial and scoop out your reactions, you're not going to bring out a scoopful of happiness. Absolutely not. If you do, you're kidding yourself. How do we react? How are we supposed to react? It says we're to talk about perseverance. Perseverance, literally, it's two words. It's under and remain. Under remain. Remain under. Stay in place. Stay put. You're in a situation that you change it if you could, but you can't. And if you were dedicated to getting out of there, you know what you would do? You would try to pay somebody off to get out of there. Even if you had to bribe somebody, you'd get angry and impatient. Think about the good old days nostalgically. Naturally, what happens when we're having a hard time persevering? Perseverance is, how nice is this image? But it's true. The ability to remain in tension. That's what perseverance is. The ability to live in tension, remain in tension. In order to mature spiritually, we need to learn to remain in places that we could get out of if we could, but we can't. I'm going to say that again. in order to mature spiritually, we need to learn to remain in places that we would like to exit if we could, but we can't. You say, what do you mean? Well, look what it says. Perseverance, endurance must finish its work, that you may be perfect and complete, not lacking anything. You hear what it's saying? If you are going to mature spiritually and add spiritual components to your life, the tool in God's tool belt that he is going to use to promote that, now I'm not jumping up and down about this, really, is endurance. Endurance must complete its work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Some of you are stuck in place, and you're saying, this is useless. I can neither go forward, nor can I retreat. I am stuck in this place. Nothing is happening. That's where you're wrong. Something is happening. Do you know what's happening? You're being made mature and complete, not lacking anything. That's what it says. Perseverance must finish its work. It's what it does, the work. Endurance is an irreplaceable tool in God's toolbox. One of the things that gets left out of our cache of spiritual resources apparently is the one that is very necessary, because what does it say? If any of you lacks what? If any of you lacks wisdom. Wisdom is the thing spiritually that God sees that we have need of. This was written at a time when people were somewhat committed to getting what they wanted. Do you think wisdom would be more challenging today? Think we're probably more impatient than they were then? Shows that our ability to stay on a website that doesn't come up right away shrinks. If we click that thing and it doesn't go now, it's really kind of funny though, isn't it? The way you end up accommodating yourself to think. There's a comedian who talks about somebody flying in a plane. Flying in a plane. He's sitting in a seat, soaring through the air, and Wi-Fi goes down. I can't believe Wi-Fi is down. You're flying. You're in a box that's catapulting you through the atmosphere. That's a pretty amazing. And so, we lose our capacity to understand where we are and what we're experiencing and what we have. I would dare say that wisdom is very challenging to have today. I would say that we have a decreased capacity to endure not having what we want. I mean, our website looks exactly like we want it to look. Our Facebook has exactly who we want it to be on there. We live in neighborhoods where we are protected. You know what I mean? Our capacity to endure tension. And you know what that means? Our wisdom quotient. I think the natural protection for wisdom in our time is eroding. But it's still important. It says, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. You're in situations you don't want. I guess if you're being matured, that will be the case, right? If you've got everything you want, you're not being matured. Is that fair to say? Is that fair to say? If endurance is the tool in God's tool belt that completes us and matures us spiritually? How do you know, though, all of us have, how do you know if you need wisdom? How would you know if you need wisdom? Do you withhold social justice from people? Accept bribes? How about impatience? Impatience. Impatience evidences a need for wisdom. How about anger? Short fuse. That evidences a need for wisdom. Nostalgia, the good old days. That evidences the need for wisdom. Again, these things, they're things we deal with, but they surface a need for wisdom. Fortunately, God gives salvation without taunting and shaming us. But understand, we usually think of wisdom as, oh God, give me wisdom. And when we think of God, because anybody asks wisdom, God will get it. God, I'm gonna ask you, I need a job. And God, give me the wisdom to make the right choice. So we end up in a job that suits us perfectly, makes us really happy. And again, that's an okay thing. And we say, God gave me wisdom. I made the right choice, the wise choice. Oftentimes we ask God about things and we end up in a place that's not exactly what we want it to be. And we said, I made the, really? Really? You made a bad choice? Why would you call it a bad choice? Well, that's easy, because it's not what I want. Makes me angry. Makes me impatient. I long for the old days. The difference isn't there when we ask God for wisdom. Wisdom allows us to remain in a place. Again, it's not mean you don't want to leave. You'd like to leave if you could, but you can't. So what you do is you say, you know what, God, here's the deal. And here's where honesty is critical. Don't pretend with him. Don't. God, thank you for this day. We always have to thank God for the days, even if it's lightning and thunder and tornadoes. God, thanks for today. I love my job. No, you don't. Thank you for the life you've given me. You're not thankful for it. You know what? Try to do this. Try to be real. You know what, God? Here's the deal. I both like where I am and I don't. Be real. That's the first step of the 5 steps. Then be still. And be still is when you look at who you're talking to. Sometimes when we pray, we just worry out loud. We just discharge tension out loud. Look at who you're talking to. Think about him. You know what he says to you? I will be exalted in the nations and on earth, and I will never leave you, and I will never forsake you. Drink that in. Then breathe freely with him. Exhale your concern. Inhale your commitments. That is a way to move towards wisdom, I think. And that's what James tells us. He tells us to ask for wisdom, but understand that wisdom won't pull you out of a place. It might enable you, well, it will enable you to stay within it. He says, but when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not believe. That man should not think he will receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. The word doubt means to divide thoroughly. That's what doubt means. The literal word is to divide thoroughly. And here's what it is. I look at my life and I separate it thoroughly. This is a good thing. This is a bad thing. Good thing, bad thing. Good thing, bad thing. Bring that pile over here. Good, bad. Good, bad. A man who doubts is a person who comes to God and he already knows what's bad. He already knows what's good. And now all you have to do is my wish needs to be your command. So if you would kindly take the bad and leave the good, we're good. And then I might even put money in the offering plate. Might even go to church more. Might pray more often. You know what a double-minded man is? A double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. It's a man who is addicted to separating life into good and bad. There's something dangerous about that. Well, here's some questions, some wise questions. Here's a question. Ready? For a Christian, is there any such thing as a bad situation? Consider it all joy when you encounter trials of many kinds. A trial feels good. Feels good. Trial feels good? No, of course it doesn't. Is bad? A trial is bad? Can't say that. Because it is what God uses to make us who He wants us to be. So be honest. God, I don't like the way this feels, but sometimes you accomplish things through things that don't feel good. I think that's wisdom. And allow, you know what, God, I'd like to get out of here, but maybe you don't want me to get out of here. Would you give me wisdom, God? That's what it says. And He gives without taunting and shaming. Are the winds that cause trees to drive their roots deep into the soil? That's what happens to a tree, by the way. When a tree is buffeted by wind, it drives the roots down deeper into the soil. Would you call those winds bad? What are your winds? What are your winds? The things that are buffeting you, that cause you to have to drive your roots deeper into what He says in order to hang on. Those winds, they don't feel good, but are they bad? They're not bad. God causes all things to work together for good. The knee-jerk tendency to divide life into good and bad gets in the way of wisdom. You know what it needs to? You know what it leads to? You should know by now. The knee-jerk tendency, addiction to dividing life into good and bad leads to oppression, impatience, anger, and nostalgia. The things that get in the way of wisdom rather than foster it. A couple things in closing. Joel, come on up. Happiness on the far side of extortion isn't worth the price. It destroys the heart. Don't expect that wisdom will enable you to be at peace with how you feel. I want you to listen, and then we're going to close. Don't relate to wisdom as something that God gives that allows you to feel wonderful about your circumstances. So if this is wisdom, I'm clicking it, and something's wrong, I don't feel wonderful. Wisdom doesn't allow you to feel wonderful. It doesn't allow you to feel great about your future. Here's what wisdom does. It allows you to endure today. That's what wisdom does. Sometimes if we think about things and we're still a little anxious and this might not work, it's not supposed to make you feel wonderful. See, wisdom doesn't eliminate tension. It allows you to endure it a day at a time as you become the person God wants you to be. Pray, Father, thank you for your wisdom, the wisdom that was modeled by Christ, honest, authentic, compassionate. I pray that we would become like Him. Thank you that you give us wisdom when we ask. You don't taunt us or shame us. You would have us focus on what we would like to receive. We're supposed to tell you what we want. But then, I guess at some point thy will be done. And that means I want to teach you to be wise. So give us what we need to be the people you'd have us to be. Give us wisdom. For Jesus' sake. Amen.